Hello, everyone. Welcome to Classic Amateurs. My name is Norman.
My name is Raz. Thank you, Norman.
So
Good
like
to
a
see
little
you.
gap. I'll make sure we cut that gap out. This is an interactive podcast. As you can see, we jump in and we discuss stuff, which sometimes works, and just right now you saw.
Yeah.
Sometimes it does not.
Sometimes it's just pure improvisation, the art
Sometimes it
of
is.
improvisation.
Yes.
Um,
The goal of the podcast is to talk about classics we read or novels that we think are classics and try to convince the other one to read it or not read it. It depends. What do you
so
think?
far, I've got a long list of stuff that I want to read. I think I don't want to be too blunt. Some of the stuff that you've you've presented, I might not read it, but I found it really interesting to talk to you about. And some of the things that you've presented, I'm genuinely interested in reading. So. For
Sure.
instance, the book that we're going to talk about today, I don't want to spoil it. It's been on my reading list for 2 decades, and I
Wow, you
remember
will.
owning the book at one point. I owned the book. I know it's a short book. It's very attractive, and it's a classic. I think the author even has a Nobel Prize, right? If I'm not
Oh,
mistaken.
does he? I
Fun
have no
fact.
idea. Okay, well, you will hate this episode because I wanted to say that this is probably a classic I would not recommend reading.
Fair enough.
And and for those who don't know what we are talking about Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. Just like the previous book, I
Cold.
it's hard. It's cold like my heart, and just like the previous book I talked about, which was Roadside Picnic. This one has a quasi adaptation into the movies. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, I think we've all seen. I actually have not seen the movie, but we're all familiar with Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now, right?
Yep, correct.
I think
So
that's iconic image of Marlon Brando, the Warlord.
this reminds me of this story of I think I was a teenager or maybe early in college, and I was talking to what books we should read with a friend, and I said, "Oh, this book is great," and he said, I'll just wait until it's adapted to a movie, and I don't want to read it." And I think with Heart of Darkness, the good news is that there is a movie, and if you watch the movie, you kind of get the plot more or less without all the tedium and all the
Yeah,
annoying details.
I have not seen the movie, which I know the adaptation is set in Vietnam, and I don't think I will see it anytime soon because I think it's pretty violent, and I'm just for a while I'm not going to be able to see any violent movies with a young family around with my
You
and
can do a bit
Astrid
of
being
you can do like quick ones, like a quick 15 minutes, and I think a movie is only
snippets. Is it
about,
on Netflix? Actually,
I'm not sure, it's only like 17 hours long, so just like most of these classic
just your
movies,
usual
so
Francis Ford Coppola who directed it, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, okay, so if you don't know Apocalypse Now, then I'll just kind of try to give you a quick synopsis. It is about a person, a man, chasing another man. It could be a gay romance story if it's set in modern age, but it's not. There's no romance in it. It's quite
It's
the opposite.
violence. There's a lot of
It's
violence.
honestly, it's I don't think it's that violent, but it's rather depressing. It's
Oh,
about human mind losing it, going wild and then mad, and then ultimately failing or realizing that this madness, this savagery is beyond them. Anyway, let me give you a quick synopsis. All right. So we have two
yeah, sure.
guys. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm just. I said, yeah, sure,
Sure.
sure.
Brilliant. So we have two guys, right? One is Kurtz, who we always hear about and we barely ever meet. He appears only in a few pages of the book, and then Marlowe, who is basically the point of view character. And Marlowe is trying to find Kurtz. And Kurtz is this guy in the middle of Africa, in Apocalypse Now, this is the guy that's played by Marlon Brando, and he's in Vietnam, so the setting is different, but never mind. And he's in the ivory trade, and he's the dude, the Chad, the it guy. Everyone's completely fanboying around Kurtz, and everyone's like, "Oh, this Kurtz guy, I want to meet him, get his autograph." He's like a local celebrity, I guess, if celebrities existed in the 19th century. Do you know much
So wait,
about?
so Marlowe was attracted to Kurtz. He didn't necessarily have a conflict with him. He was going after him to join him.
Sort of. Well, do you know what the deal was in middle of Africa in the beginning of, I guess, 20th century, or even like earlier, maybe middle of 19th century? Do you know what was the big deal? What was the business? What was their Bitcoin?
I mean, there was a lot of colonialism right at the time, and so-called imperialism, with
Sure,
Africa being
sure,
occupied by all
sure.
these European powers. I think they were after some
Yeah,
resources.
yeah.
Which
Resource.
ones?
Do you know what resource?
Did you say
There's a
Ivory
country named after
earlier?
it. Yeah, it's Ivory. It's Ivory is the shit. Everyone wants some of that ivory. I wouldn't even know what ivory is. I think that's something you see on tiles or something. Maybe I don't really know.
I mean, it's
Anyway,
effectively just bone. Bone. I think you can just kind of sculpt it put it into nice ornaments, if I'm not
yeah, it
mistaken.
could be. Could be. I wish I wouldn't. I would become a sculptor or an artist rather than a boring economist. But here I am. So, ivory, yeah. So the whole thing is ivory trade, and all these trading posts are set up,
I
and
mean,
there are all these.
this is sorry. This is very frowned upon, by the way. But I have seen, for instance, games like chess games made
Uh
out of
huh.
ivory,
Okay.
and you can't do it anymore. You're not allowed to transact
Oh,
ivory, and it's very heavily regulated. But
oh, it's a shame.
because of the animals.
I was about to say I
The
want some
elephants.
ivory stuff. Um,
I'm sorry,
anyway,
I interrupted your flow. Keep going.
no, no, no. And I guess you brought up colonialism, and it's depending on who you read or whose review you are listening to. They throw in all the isms, the imperialism, the colonialism, the racism, and nature. So it's all about these topics, and
Naturalism.
naturalism. Yeah, whatever it is. Naturalism sounds like you wanna like be naked and run outside naked to me, but it might be something else. Anyway, so
I
yeah,
think just on the isms, I think there's a, I don't know if you know this movie, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It's a movie
yeah,
from the 80s.
yeah, I've seen it.
I think there's a line in there that I'm not for any ism. I'm not for socialism. I'm not for
Yeah,
capitalism.
he's the
Don't put me with
centrist.
any of the isms. Yeah,
He's the
he
barbecue
doesn't want to be
guy.
part of the isms.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is all just kind of like an interpretation of the story. The story is really just one long, boring ferry ride. It is really just this guy more or less sailing down the river with some troubles. Sure, there's some violence, and trying to find goods. And everyone he meets is like, "Oh, this Kurtz guy is incredible. He's amazing." But he went a bit quiet, so say hi to him when you meet him, and you start to get the sense like, "Oh, holy shit, what's going on with this guy?" He's
So
everyone's
there's kind of
wants.
a discrepancy between what you hear of him being great and really the radio silence that he's going through, and
Yeah,
suspicious as well.
well, in a way, because they do receive ivory from Kurtz, so Kurtz is doing his job. It's just they don't hear that much of him, so it's a bit unclear. And I think the movie adaptation put it a bit more bluntly forward that Kurtz basically went insane. And the idea is that Africa at that point of time was quite, I guess, I want to call it uncivilized, but I don't want to come across insensitive. But how should I say? It's close to nature.
Underdeveloped and
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, there's in the story itself, there are cannibal tribes roaming around. People who are most of the people that surround them are either slaves or servants. They're not very intelligent, and he does get some liking to some servant that he's like, oh, this kid is great, and then 2 pages later the kid gets shot down and dies. So it's not very happy. So it's all just like a very long, as I said, a ferry ride, and a lot of it is very contemplative. It's all about thinking about ideas and how Kurt is amazing and how he will react when he talks to him. And I guess in the end he finds him. And some stuff,
Spoiler alert.
some spoiler alert, some stuff going down. Really funny thing, by the way. The book has a ending, obviously, and they originally wanted to have the same ending from Apocalypse Now, but the test audience hated it so much that they changed it. But so, but then they actually did like a second version
Sorry,
of the movie.
say again. Apocalypse Now wanted to have the same end as Heart of Darkness.
Yeah, more or less.
That's what you mean,
And
like the book. Hmm.
yeah, the book. But then the audience hated it so much that they did like a slightly different ending. And then on top of my head, I'm not sure if they did a third ending or not, but there was like at least two versions of Apocalypse Now. Depending on which one you prefer, you might see one or the other. I think I watched the worst one. I think the one that no one liked. But yeah, it's pretty bad. I don't know if you want me to spoil it or not, but I
I
guess
don't care.
well,
I
I
want. I
mean,
want to hear more about it. I
I guess
mean, I might watch the movie. I'm genuinely interested in the movie. So
I see. I see. Well, the I guess some of the interpretation and meaning is actually detached from the movie. It's more about the book. So the book itself is, played in the middle of the jungle, and it talks about how Kurtz has joined the tribes. Initially, he was like running a trading post, trading ivory and doing
yeah,
stuff.
killing elephants, the
Yeah,
usual.
yeah, whatever you need to make ivory, I guess. But then as he got delved deep into, the tribal era, he joined the tribes as well. I guess he smoked a bit of kush, he sacrificed some people, maybe some ate some human liver. I don't know, whatever they
As
did
you
back
as you,
then.
as you do to survive in those
Well,
jungles.
you
Yeah,
you gotta be the tough guy, right? And ironically, he didn't just join as like a commoner. He was the white boy in the group. He took over, and apparently he got so excited for his tribal lifestyle that he became a bit of an extremist. And if you are seen as an extremist by cannibals, you probably can guess how bad that is. Yeah, just to give you an example, there's a point where Marlowe just kind of wanders around and sees these spikes on top of the huts, and he's just like, "Oh yeah, that's just for defense or whatever." But there's like some trash on top of it. He starts looking at it closer. He realizes all these are human heads. So he just kind of collected human heads and just pop, 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 popped it.
that's
Just
him, and he didn't realize that he's done it.
no, no, that's Marlowe. So and it's implied that Kurtz has done it. So Kurtz is the nuts one, right?
Got it. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
anyway, Marlowe returns to England in the end of the book, and Kurtz is not around anymore. And he visits a bunch of people that know Kurtz, and people are still fanboying around him. Kurtz is a great speaker. He used to be a journalist, and he could have been a politician. And he could have made this country great, whatever, whatever. And he's like, yeah, yeah, totally. He's just a bit,
I've seen the real face of Kurtz. Is that what you
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah. He didn't look anything like that, and I think in the very end he meets the wife, the widow, because apparently Kurtz was so good he even like had like a wife, and the lady was waiting for him because he's such a great guy, and the lady's like, "Oh, what was his last words?" And Marlowe was like, "Oh, he just said your name," but in reality it was something completely different, and it kind of implies that like this savagery, the nature, the inner animal that we have inside is something we just have to ignore or even lie about to get to deal with. And there's like
Wait,
go for it.
isn't Marlo Brando? I think at the end, and I have
You
not seen the
managed to mix
movie.
two characters
Going,
up. So Marlowe is the name of the main character in Heart of Darkness. Marlon Brando is the guy who played Skirts in Apocalypse Now.
yeah, I'm
It
referring to Kurtz now in Apocalypse Now.
so
He was.
Kurtz is
I think
Kurtz
he
is the
ends
bad
with
guy.
the
Yeah,
horror,
yeah,
right?
horror.
Isn't
Yeah,
that a good classic?
yeah, horror is his last words, and it kind of sums up, what it is to go insane. And the whole idea is really about, how do you deal with parts of human nature that are often illogical and often savage, often violent, and you cannot control it. What do you do when it takes over? And Marlowe's, that is the Heart of Darkness's answer is just, you just lie and just move on.
Hmm.
You just act like it didn't happen.
Well, I
So
want to put this in context a little bit because this is super interesting. I mean, you touched upon like so many themes here. I don't know if you still had something
sure.
to add, but you've got touched upon the political aspect, family life, and I think ultimately the psychological element, which is probably the deepest here. It sounds like this is almost an allegory into an introspection into the unknown, right? What
Yeah.
effectively it's a kind of a contrast. I'm putting it very much in Jungian terms or in Freudian terms because I can already guess that at the time when this was written, I think, as you say, early 1900s, all the hype was around psychoanalysis. So, you had a much more atheistic Europe at the time, a
Hmm.
Europe without the traditional values. Everybody was looking for an answer and everybody was looking in on the inside, right, into the psyche. So,
Well, it
basically what
was
I'm
just sorry to interject. This was, so the book was written in 1899. I don't know when it is played. I don't think there's a year to it. Um, but yeah, it was pre-World War. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, but I guess my point was it sounds to me like this effectively this search is a search it's kind of if you put it in Freudian terms or Jungian terms, the contrast between the ego and the id, right? To some extent, like the ego, this great persona that Kurtz is, illustrious, accomplished, successful, and then as you go deeper and deeper into it, you find yourself effectively meeting the id, the animalistic part of our nature, right? The impulsive one, and that's terrifying. That triggers PTSD and so on, and it's unspeakable. You can't really describe it. The horrors that it is capable of, but we humans are capable. It's almost like encountering our shadow. And then this journey, effectively, that Marlowe is undertaking, is kind of our consciousness, our self, because we're
Yeah.
going through this journey from the ego to the id, and we're uncovering all these things. And maybe that's what living is all about, even though it's a bit depressing, is understanding that fundamental truth about human nature.
Well, I guess if it would play today, the guy would just call a psychologist and go under psychiatric care, right? But back then, this wasn't really available.
Yeah, yeah, and it's all played into this, as you described it, a very, very, very tough political environment, right? I mean, this was literally 20 years before the First World War, which was in some parts also a territorial
Mostly.
or colonial war. I mean, there was a lot of colonial tensions built up in the past, and Africa was this theater, right, for a lot of colonial tensions. And it's interesting to see the what's happening with this main character being kind of a canvas for all the atrocities that would later happen, right, in Europe. It is a, in fact, the persona of right the type of experiences that then human beings are capable of inflicting upon each other in a sort of madness,
Yeah,
right? If
I
you want,
think I
I'm giving
think
it more credit than than you are, but I'm just speculating here. Maybe if there was
yeah,
any
fair
merit
enough.
to it, maybe that would be it. But very depressing,
That's true.
and there's
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, when I read it, I always saw it as a story about humans fighting the unknown, mostly nature, and how things. I mean, in a way, it is a bit like old school Shining. If you ever watched The Shining, it's guy goes up to a castle and then goes insane because of the past and all the burden that comes with the castle. This is more or less it. The guy goes into the jungle and there's a lot of stuff going on in the jungle, and all the
mm,
history of the jungle waits on him so much that he I guess joins it. And becomes what it
Mm.
is.
I think two points I wanted to make around that, what you just said. One is, and I've heard this, I think, in other from other people, that we're relying on other people. We're on we're relying on socialization for sanity, and the moment we're subtracted from that environment of other people's feedback, our internal sense of self collapses to some extent. We don't know what good and bad is. We don't even know how, who we are. We lose our sense of identity because we don't have other people's reflections and visuals even on in front of us. That's point number one. Point number two is that I think there's an element of mental health and morality. I think the moment you've kind of lose your understanding of good and bad, which probably comes from the socialization, then you can easily collapse into some form of insanity. And it's often pathological deviations of mental health are sometimes associated with kind of moral questions or things that really bother you, like uh, violence, that sort of thing. Extreme violence and PTSD and a bunch of other things can trigger all sorts of deviations.
I guess in the context of the book, there's definitely a moral vacuum or somewhat of a moral relativity involved. I mean, they don't have the same morals. They're all about business, right? They are there to extract ivory
It's
and then
business time.
move on. That's kind of like
It's a commodity, right?
their
It doesn't
mindset.
matter that you're killing elephants or whatever, right? That you're
I
slave
mean,
putting using
killing
slaves
each
or
other, making each other into a sandwich for dinner, that sort of stuff. Well, so it is a different word, right? It's a different morality. But now that I think about it as well, this whole pattern appears in other movies as well. I mean, and other stories as well, like Interstellar. If you ever watch the movie, has that momentum, which is
Mhm.
very similar, I guess, plot device. And then Lord of Flies is more or less about this sense of civilization breaking down as we face struggles. So I mean,
Yeah.
you can give it a lot of credit if you want to, but honestly, the book is not good enough to do that. I mean,
I'm
okay,
glad
if it's
finally the classic amateurs are dissing the book they're presenting. I like that. That's
I,
look,
I mean, maybe
don't
the
read it
guy
is
got an
basically.
overprice for it. I don't know.
But maybe the
Yeah,
standards were really low
I
in
all I'm saying is
1899 and
if
we've
this
progressed.
yeah, well, okay, so I guess if this guy got Nobel Prize for it, then I'd say my faith in humanity has not been restored at all. It is not great. And then that's another thing as well. Like a lot of people that look at it tends to look at like the whole colonialism, imperialism, or even racism angle of it, because most Africans. I wanted to say African Americans for some reason because that's what always in the news, but just Africa. These are just Africans. No Americans at the moment. Most Africans are either servants or slaves. As I said, they are a bit different. Like some of them are quite sympathetic and then they die quickly. Some of them are not so sympathetic and they are always there. Um, it's hard to tell. Like there's clearly a divide there, but I don't think Joseph Conrad himself has written it to emphasize the racial differences. I think that's just because the context and the environment that the story is written, in my opinion, but I might be wrong.
I can take your word for it. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Haven't
No,
read the
no,
book.
that's fine. And you don't get this sense, or at least I didn't get this sense from Apocalypse Now either. They were, the story is more or less the same. People are going insane in the jungle, and everything that you see is just people slowly losing it. But I don't really think it's trying to make a point about any like social issues. I think it goes beyond that. It's more existential, as you said. It's when you have moral vacuum, when you have all sort of mental illnesses that you are hanging out with, that sort of stuff. So yeah, Yeah,
And is this something you read a while back, or is it recently that you read it?
few
When did you
years ago.
develop this antipathy for Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness? This
I
hate in your heart for this book.
I honestly, I saw the book, saw the title, and I thought this is one of the best titles I ever seen on a book. It's a great title,
It is pretty
and
badass style.
it's a really good title. And I was like, oh, I gotta read this. And then I tried reading it, and I just hated it. And then a few years later, I was like, I'm gonna go through this, and I managed to get through it. It's just bad.
Yeah, I'm
It's
surprised you
really
subjected
bad.
yourself to a lot of reading tortures along the way.
Listen, this is a book that's ideal as a audio book. So it's like while you're running or you're doing your groceries, or I guess it's better than fighting with your spouse or something.
There are many things that are better than fighting with your spouse.
Exactly. For
Almost
example,
all of
reading
them.
Heart of Darkness. um,
Not
yeah,
bad.
it is a short book, so that's definitely a plus.
That's a
It
relief.
it's a relief. There are some interesting stuff in it. I guess it's if you never read something like that, then fair
So
enough.
who would benefit from reading this book? What's the target audience for this
I
book
don't
today?
really think. And here's the thing: I think the target audience are people that read Lord of Flies and liked Lord of Flies. But here's the problem: if you read Lord of Flies, you don't have to read this because it's the same exact thing.
So
So
I still remember when didn't we go to see Lord of the Flies together as a play recently? I mean, a
no,
few
we
years ago.
saw it separately, but we both saw
Oh,
the
so
play.
okay. So no, but I thought. Sorry, I sat through that play and it was just a bunch of kids screaming effectively,
Oh
and
yeah,
it just escalates and gets worse and worse until tragedy hits.
Lord of Flies is
I don't know.
absolutely violent. It's a very brutal story, and it's a good story as well. Much better than Heart of
Yeah, but
Darkness.
it's just linear. It's a story of free fall and decay, and yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, and again, I definitely recommend watching Apocalypse Now if you have a 3 hours, and it is a very long movie, but especially the director cut. There's something about it that's just like it's so good.
the extra long, lengthy scenes,
Yeah, yeah. There's all
the camera
discussion.
lingering on the images.
Yeah, it's great. It's depravity, right? It's people. It's really sad. The only like grandiose part of it is the one that most people actually know about or show is the helicopters and the ride of Valkyrs. I'm not sure how to pronounce it.
There's a great
Playing
soundtrack
and
to
the
it as well, if I
napalm.
remember.
Yeah, it's
Mm.
Wagner's Ride of Valkyrs, and they play it during like the napalm strike, and then they show how the jungle just burns down. And in the movie, that's like somewhere in the beginning, like it's at the early stage, so that's when everything is cool. Everything is like we are on top of that, and then as they keep going, it gets
Yeah,
worse and worse until the point where it's just like fuck. So it's really brutal.
but that movie
Yeah,
came out when the tide had turned, I guess, against the war, right? And in the U.S.,
I'm not sure.
I
I'm not really sure.
suspect.
When was Apocalypse Now? When was it?
Because
I
the
don't know.
depiction of that is very I would say potentially anti-violence, anti-war, right?
It's
79, there you
I
go,
don't.
at the end of the Vietnam
79.
War.
Yeah, was 75. So it's 4 years after the Vietnam War ended. And I honestly, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'd say it's more about it's okay. I guess because it's played in Vietnam, it's probably seen as an anti-war, and I get it. I understand why. I also think like the source material is beyond that. The idea of becoming what you most afraid of is something that's ageless, something that always applies.
The shadow, the
The
horror,
horror.
the horror.
The sandwich. The human sandwich. Yeah, there's also stuff. Anyway, it's a
Right.
horrible book. I don't recommend reading it. Maybe watch a movie. That's what I say. Great title though. So put it on your bookshelf, and when people come over and be like, "Oh, this sounds like great," and you're like, "Yeah, yeah, just leave it there."
Great. If you want to
It's
look like an intellectual, just put that
yeah,
book up there.
yeah. It's a weird
Put it
one.
on the shelf.
Anyway,
I'll
I think
put it next to my Harry Potter.
yeah, absolutely. Next to Harry Potter, I think it's an ideal duo. I'd probably, if I had a kid, I would either read Harry Potter to them or Heart of Darkness. I'm not really sure which one. I'd probably flip a coin.
See how they turn up. Just have twins and run the experiment.
Listen. If I read Heart of Darkness to any of my kids when they are young, I will know how they will turn up. It's, oh boy.
Intellectuals.
Yeah, I guess you
True
can.
intellectuals.
I'm not sure if that's the word I'd use. Anyway, so that was it. Do you want to
Cool.
add
Awesome.
anything else?
Awesome. No, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I'm taking something out of this. I had a really great time chatting to you about Heart of Darkness.
Brilliant. I enjoyed it as
Thank
well.
you.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Talk to you next week.